Joining us now after that compromise deal was reached is Senator Nick Schroer, who sponsored the bill in the Senate. Good to have you with us. Senator, what's the rush here? The voters of St. Louis are right now deciding who should control the police department, and on April 8th, they might make a change. You have until May for session to conclude. Why not wait and see if the voters want to make a change before you force their hand?
Well, I think the voters of the state have made it clear, the voters of St. Louis have made it clear that they do want to change. Back in November, when they elected many strong Republicans, including Mike Kehoe, who indicated this is a top priority of his, changing how the St. Louis Metropolitan Police Department is managed, listening to 98% of listening to all of the police, but in the most recent poll, 98% of them have indicated they need this bill to pass so they can have competitive salaries, have the tools necessary to do their jobs in decreasing crime and allowing for businesses and tourism and people to come back to the St. Louis region. But three, to have somebody that's going to listen to them and work with them, not against them. So, this is something we've been working on for at least 5 years now. I've had it for 5 years. I know others have had it in the past, but the Ethical Society of Police, the Fraternal Order of Police, and the Police Officers Association have been screaming from the rooftops that they need help. And even though the voters in the city of St. Louis made their voices loud and clear by an overwhelming majority of them voting for Kara, who has indicated, look, the mismanagement of the city as a whole needs to change. I think that just, shows us exactly where we need to be. And that's with this compromise deal that we passed out of the Senate this week.
But there again, I just want to be clear. Are you suggesting that no one on the ballot, no candidate running for mayor, would have done what you're suggesting here, which is to hire more police, pay them more? Mayor Jones herself has raised police pay twice.
Yeah, and listening to the police and listening to the citizens at the many town halls that I've done with Clippers and Cops, Ty Dennis, who's a St. Louis resident, came back from Atlanta where he was a police officer, and he started this foundation, Clippers and Cops, getting the community and the police together. I've heard loud and clear, especially in the north side, that the people are wanting a safer community. They want a community policing once again. And even two alderwomen stood up just weeks ago saying that local control has never worked when it came to the management of the police. It's not going to work, and things were a heck of a lot better under state control. Now, to be clear, this is not the same state control. This is more aimed at citizen board control, where the goal of Republicans and even Democrats, after hours and hours of negotiating the past several weeks and even several months, the goal that we are trying to maintain is getting politics out of policing and putting these citizens who are working with the community, now going to be working with the senators and other elected officials to make St. Louis safer, making decisions based upon what's best for the city and not for politics.
Well, to be clear, a mayor would be on that board. That's a politician. A governor would be appointing the other
Correct.
5 members of that board. That's a politician. So, and then you'd have 4 new voting commissioners. They're basically bureaucrats who are overseeing. It's another layer of bureaucracy over a police chief. So I don't know. Let me ask you this question. How would you assess the job that former Mayor Francis Slay did in the city of St. Louis?
I think he did a heck of a lot better than the current mayor.
Would you take his advice if you were to ask him what the state takeover was like? Because he was there when it was under state takeover. He led the charge for local control. He's the only person, perhaps, who has that intimate knowledge of what it was like then versus what it's like now. Would you listen to Francis Slay?
Well, I'll listen to anybody. And I think I made that clear with the compromise deal that we're willing to listen to anybody when the city is in dire straits right now. And comparing what the city was like, what the world was like, what the state was like under Francis Slay is night and day difference in what we're dealing with today. And I think, back then, no one, especially Francis Slay, could never envision a Republican or a Democrat vocally campaigning, and then trying to defund the police. So this is night and day difference. But yeah, I'm willing to work with leaders who have been invested, who have been on the ground working with police. And I think a lot of the community will say that Francis Slay had a great working relationship with the police department and with police leaders. And, that's something that we don't have with the current mayor.
Mm-hmm. I want to use an analogy for a minute about public schools to policing. Republicans generally, and I don't know your specific rhetoric on this, but I know that Republicans generally have argued that if a city's population shrinks or families move out of a neighborhood, that police or that school district might not need all the same funding that it once had, or it might not need all the same staff that it once had. The city of St. Louis is a shrinking city. As we bleed population and shrink drastically over the last 50 years, losing more than 500,000 people, Should the police force also shrink to match that population shift?
Well, I think when we look at where St. Louis was even 10 years ago, yeah, you are correct. It is shrinking. Business is leaving. People are leaving. But why? Why is that? Look at other cities that have dealt with these crime problems that had similar effects of increased crime, decreased population, decreased business. How did they solve that? It wasn't just acknowledging, hey, we're losing population. Let's get rid of more police. Let's work with the community. This is what they decided. Let's work with the community, put more resources behind law enforcement, let them do their jobs of protecting and serving and working in the community. So there is that trusted relationship. And what has happened? Nashville, Tennessee, very similar roots to St. Louis. I mean, the size of the cities, the size of the state, and now they have gone gangbusters in the tourism that they attract, the safety. They're up over 500,000 in terms of population. I think all of us will say that Nashville, Tennessee has a lot going on in the good area right now that we can learn from. And I've talked to Democrats on the Kansas City side.
I've got to interject there, Senator. I think our barbecue is significantly better.
I will say 100%. Our sports teams are a hell of a lot better. Our music is a hell of a lot better. But looking at how you deal with those, our leaders don't need to just accept defeat. They can't sit back and say, okay, now we're under 300,000 in population. No, we should be double that. We should be triple that in some respects, because I think we have the structure that's better than Nashville, Tennessee. That's better than other areas within the United States that has embraced that community policing does work.
But maybe you see what I'm driving at when I ask the question about a shrinking city and it's the size of its police force, because St. Louis has more police per capita than most major American cities, even still. And part of that is because the population has shrunk and the police force has not shrunk at the same rate. What this bill does, that you're proposing the Senate to pass on Monday, is it ties the hands of City Hall and says you must spend 25% of your budget, eventually, over the next few years. 1/4 in every tax dollar must be spent on this priority. That is opposed to local control, no? You're taking a fiscal decision, you're tying the hands of City Hall and forcing them to spend money on something when that may or may not be the most flexible need at the moment. Why be so rigid?
Well, I think in this day and age, going back to where we were 10 years ago, we didn't have the political rhetoric of defunding the police. We didn't actually have politicians campaigning on not having the back of the men and women in blue protecting the community. So this is a weird area that we're in. And yes, tying the hands of those in Kansas City, that's something that voters passed actually 2 times with Senator Luetkemeier's language that was thrown out initially by the courts. We went back, addressed those fixes, and put that back in place. So the people of Missouri support their law enforcement. They don't want to defund them. They want to defend them. And I think working with the community, with this community board, even though the governor, yes, gets to appoint them, the one of the concessions was it has to be with advice and consent, just like all of the other appointments. And these people have to be citizens in the city of St. Louis, not in Jefferson City. So the goal is looking long term. Yes, tying the hands to make sure that the #1 crime deterrent is going to be actively in place to help that city grow. Because when St. Louis is thriving, the entire state of Missouri in the Midwest arguably is thriving. But when there's rampant crime and businesses are leaving the city of St. Louis, all other areas, not only around us, but the state as a whole, the general revenue for the state, the services that are provided throughout Jefferson City and the government, they're arguably impacted a heck of a lot by what happens in the city of St. Louis.
Last question before we let you go. 1 year from now, 2 years from now, if the city police department has not grown its sworn officers, if the police force has not grown any larger under state control, will you reassess whether this was the right path?
I think we always need to reassess and be willing to work and make things better. And that's something that I said in the press conference at the end of the week, the legislative week, is look, I'm willing to work with the House Republicans and Democrats, the Senate Republicans and Democrats, leaders in the city of St. Louis, for all the reasons that I said on this call or on this interview today. And if it means more funding from the state to get the job done, if it means tweaking the legislation, if it means thinking outside of the box to grow St. Louis and make it that prosperous city that it once was, I'm willing to do it. Mark my words.
I guess the better way to ask the question is this. Will you grade the success or failure of the state takeover of the police department on the city police department growing or shrinking?
Well, I think that's got to be part of it. That's got to be one of the calculus in seeing if this is going to work. And in 5 years from now, if we're continuing to deplete population, if crime is not getting under control, if there's no transparency with the crime statistics, then yeah, we've got a huge problem on our hands. But arguably, I think the community leaders that are going to be on this board, getting confirmed by the Senate, working with the Senate, working with police, and the police knowing that yes, they're going to have raises. That's why that we built in that mechanism of the funding language. But you're going to have people that have your back, not only in St. Louis City but in Jefferson City as well. I think this is a start to something that our state truly needs.
All right, Senator Nick Schroer, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.